We really don't have effective city centers where you have, businesses grouped in various hubs. So you can hop into, you do your banking, you buy your clothes, you do your spa, and then you do some shopping. And you take your kids to one or two places where they can eat, or a food court and things like that. So we don't have effective city centers. What ShopRite has done with the experience that they gathered from Nigeria, where it took also a leap of faith to invest in Nigeria for 5 years through another private equity group, but they invested in Nigeria, its first shopping mall outside of Southern Africa. But after doing that in Nigeria, as a 5-year investment, within 2 years, the ShopRite group was actually able to fully, they were actually able to fully reap their returns on investment in Nigeria. And so they did an analysis and then started other developmental projects of shopping malls, the same shopping malls, in various hubs in Nigeria. But now they are not resting on Nigeria, they are not staying in Nigeria alone anymore. And so that's why they took a strategic decision in partnership with some other locals and banking partners to go into various hubs across Africa. So what ShopRite has done is that in partnership with some of the state governments in these countries, from Angola to Mozambique, to Namibia, and to Namibia, they have actually acquired some property, land, as a public, it's called the PPP project, which is called the Public-Private Partnership, and so they're developing shopping malls across this whole region. Why is this important to us in this room today? Why is this important to us? We're categorized as middle-class people, whether upper middle class, lower middle class, or floating, we're categorized as the middle class. This is very important to us because there's a huge opportunity in the property market. We talked about the hubs, we talked about technology, but the property market becomes very critical because when you look at the 62% deficit in that market, it tells you that there's a huge potential to do business effectively. There's also a huge potential for us to spend our own money without coming out here, because the shopping centers are there and they have all the brands that we can look for, from the Hugo Boss to the Pradas and to all those other entrepreneurs that have become the giants of today. They are all in the shopping centers. But what is even more critical to us is the fact that we really do not have to start by acquiring 540 or 54,000 square meters of land, or acquiring acres and acres or hectares and hectares of land to start. We are able to actually go in and take a decision as to what it is we can afford to do in partnership with other groups, whether it's the public sector, the state government, or whether it's even with other private sector managers that we're familiar with. We could also go into those markets as consortiums of businesses, because this is what the other group that is actually investing in the Holiday Inn chain and the Marriott chain, this is what they have done. They have actually formed a consortium. It's a private group that has formed a consortium of 10, one company from 10 groups. And they went into that market and bought that franchise. And you can imagine what kind of opportunity, what kind of returns that they would derive from such an investment. And so that's why it's very important for us to look at our groups, the networks we belong to, the people that we do business with, our funding partners, the partnerships that we belong to, and determine within our groups what we think we can do in these markets as they open up. Why do we talk about the Nigerian market, the African market, or the West African market, depending on where we belong to or which ones we fall into? Why do we talk about these markets right now? We believe that these markets have a huge opportunity to generate very good returns from the examples that we can draw from the people that have done businesses in those countries as we speak. Right now, the United Nations tells us, the United Nations UNCTAD Trade Department tells us that 29% is the return, is the average return on investment that you can never get out of the West African zone. I'm not sure that we have so many countries that can actually compare in terms of returns when you talk about the West African zone. And so you've got to look at your returns. The risk is there, and I must add that note of warning, and it's a note of caution, that there are political risks. We know all of this. However, where the risk is higher, the return might also be higher. much higher. Also, because of the regulatory framework in some of these countries, it's easier to do business. The regulatory framework is evolving, and when you have situations where the regulatory framework is evolving, it might be much easier to quickly do business because you settle down, you know where you're going to, you get some concessions, you have some tax incentives and things like that. Because of those tax incentives that you will ordinarily not get in other parts of North America, it becomes quite imperative to begin to look at countries like that, where businesses can be done effectively. How do we get into these countries? We've looked at some of the case studies and all of that. A few of these companies that we keep talking about now that are fast becoming the giants of tomorrow because of the volume that they are now transacting, have actually partnered with locals on ground. They've partnered with financial institutions. So you have some of the groups that Amanda was talking about in East Africa that partnered with banks, local banks. And they are offering what you call vehicle financing. I'm sure for some of us that are from some of the African countries present in this room today, I'm not sure if any of us has ever accessed what you call a vehicle finance loan. We're not usually known to buy.
Part of why I love what I do and why I love traveling back to Africa and East Africa is because the young people I meet there are so absolutely incredible. They're talented, they're educated, they're driven, they're very engaged in national politics, global affairs, change making in their own communities. But young people are often unemployed or underemployed in the informal economy with low productivity and low pay. Of Africa's unemployed, 60% are young people, and youth unemployment rates are double those of adult unemployment in most African countries. So this is a huge issue and something really important to address to improve the economy of the continent. One of the amazing things about young people is that they're very open-minded, they're exposed to new ideas, often more traveled than their elders. And young people, especially again in East Africa, when I think of like youth in Canada and myself and youth in East Africa, like East African youth grow up speaking like 3 languages, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. A lot of, myself, I only speak 1. Young people, again, they're very talented, especially in the arts. When we talk about African culture, dance, music, it really comes naturally. And again, I find that young people in East Africa are very determined, very hardworking. In Kenya, class position is something really important. So everyone's just studying and learning every chance they can get. And I think that specifically speaking of Kenya, unemployment and access to education is a huge issue. And in Kenya, primary school education is supposed to be free, but it's still so inaccessible to many children because you still have to pay for school uniforms, books, bags, shoes, etc. So that's one of the big issues that I want to talk about today. So economic development in East Africa, one of the biggest industries in East Africa is tourism, and I just want to briefly touch on this.
Yeah, I know, it's going to be a very long call.
Recently, part of my presentation is focused a lot on the research I recently did in East Africa. I went back there for 3 months in the spring. I was in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, connecting around and learning around all these areas. And this is a small social enterprise that works in tourism in Uganda in the Lake Bunyonyi region. And just an interesting thing I came across when I was traveling in East Africa, the tourism industry has been hit really hard recently, mainly due to Ebola and terrorism. And these are factors that also I think are really important to consider when we talk about economic development in Africa, especially when, Ebola, which happened in West Africa in 3 countries, is affecting the entire tourism industry in East Africa. Part of this is, I guess we can say, just something that happens, but a lot of it is also ignorance when it comes to, sorry? Ignorance, exactly. A lot of it is ignorance when it comes to the Western world. So just something to consider when we talk about tourism in East Africa and not only does it provide income and livelihoods to people across the region, but there's also important environmental conservation efforts. It also provides greater cultural understanding for foreigners and locals through that exchange, and especially to the rural areas of the country. That's a really important part when it comes to economic development.
Oh man, she wants me to invite
Rwanda. Do we have anyone from Rwanda?
It's too late to me.
Okay, Rwanda is one of the most special countries I've ever been to. Rwanda is, and they're doing a lot right now. I'm not an expert on Rwanda, but from what I know, President Paul Kagame is investing a lot in entrepreneurship and youth right now, and the country is doing really well. So since the genocide in 1994, they've developed quite a bit. It's very peace and safe, it's very stable. And the young people are really, really excited about their country and excited to be there and excited about the future of their country. Rwanda is the 10th least corrupt country in all of Africa. It's the 3rd greenest destination in the world. They do a lot when it comes to conservation efforts and cleanliness. One of the most amazing statistics about Rwanda, it is the only country in the entire world that has more women in parliament than men. 64% women. And when it comes to the Millennium Development Goals, Rwanda is one of the few countries in Africa that's meeting their targets. And when it comes to gender equality, Rwanda has met all of the Millennium Development Goals indicators in that category. So a quote from President Paul Kagame, he said, "It is increasingly clear to us that entrepreneurship is the surest way for a nation to meet our goals and to develop prosperity for the greatest number of people. Government activities should focus on supporting entrepreneurship, not just to meet those targets, but to unlock people's minds, to allow innovation to take place, and to enable people to exercise their talents." Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation. And, you know, every time I go to Africa, people are always like, again, the fairly ignorant people, are always like, especially as a Canadian, they're like, oh my gosh, like violence, corruption, disease, poverty, those are the things you think of. And a big part of that is the media. So I always, every time I go and every time I talk to people, I always like to focus on the positive, and especially like technology and innovation. There is so much going on the African continent. It's just fabulous, and it's really exciting. And so I'm excited to share you a little bit of what I learned in East Africa. So entrepreneurship, I think we're all pretty familiar with that. But something I wanted to mention today is social entrepreneurship. Is anyone familiar with the term social entrepreneurship? Awesome, that's good. So when it comes to social entrepreneurship, this is about the fusion of business and social good, a triple bottom line, talking about people, planet, and profit. So I'm going to mention a few really incredible social enterprises today, but I think as entrepreneurs and business leaders, we need to continue to focus on not only coming up with creative business ideas and recognizing business opportunities, but thinking more holistically about how can we use these business opportunities to also develop the community, create employment, you know, empower women, employ young people. Mobile technology. So mobile technology is one focus of my presentation today, mainly because it is another huge trend happening in Africa. As we know, everyone has access to a mobile phone. Infrastructure development is still not quite as developed as we have here, so tablets and laptops and internet access still a little bit behind on that side, but mobile technology is growing like crazy. Nairobi, so while I was in Nairobi, someone referred to Nairobi as Silicon Savannah. So there's a lot going on in Nairobi, again, when it comes to innovation and technology startups, and young people are, I mean, we're obsessed with technology, we love it. WhatsApp, Twitter, they're all very popular. M-Pesa, who's familiar with M-Pesa? Almost, that's it? Really? Okay, so M-Pesa, one of the most brilliant, innovative technologies in the world that came from Kenya. 17 million users in different countries around the world, $40 billion worth of transactions. 42% of Kenya's GDP is transacted through M-Pesa. So this is just like one example of the power of technology and innovation, and you know, M-Pesa has had some good recognition in the media, but it's things like this that we need to highlight and showcase even more. Innovation hubs. So Helen was talking about a lot of the innovation centers we have in Ontario. Innovation hubs are everywhere across the African continent right now. So here's a few of the ones in the East African region. Most of them are in the urban centers and capital areas, capital cities, but there are a few: Mombasa Tech, Swahili Box, Rift Valley Innovation Center, and Lake Hub, all in Kenya, which are in smaller cities. So they're popping up like crazy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these innovation hubs now and why they're so special. So I believe it was the very first innovation hub in Nairobi, and is supported by Google. And innovation hubs are really physical co-working spaces in communities of like-minded people where they can connect and learn and share and collaborate and work. It's an office space. But they also host lots of events. They also have competitions. You can also, it's a phenomenal networking opportunity, like a conference, but you're there every day. And a great place to find partners, customers and clients, possibly investors. Actually, the reason I got connected to Casa was also because of an innovation hub called the Center for Social Innovation, where I met Sean, my co-MC. So that's why I was here last year, because of our connection through an innovation hub. Now, what I love about iHub in Nairobi is when I met with them, first of all, they have like a really collaborative, open approach to sharing with other hubs in the region. But the other thing is they're like a completely corruption-free environment. And in Kenya, the reality is it's difficult to find that. And so the fact that they're very strict about that and promote that is really important, especially when it comes to attracting foreign investment. Okay, so I have 3 case studies to show with you of really cool tech startups that are happening in the region. The first one is Arifu, and this is actually was started by a Canadian who's in Nairobi. It's a mobile-based tech startup, so through SMS text messages, their goal is to educate underserved communities and help people improve their incomes. So it's an educational platform. They provide entrepreneurship training, financial literacy, technical skills. So farmers are like a big market of theirs in Kenya. And it's a transition from the typical like nonprofit in-person workshops and conferences like this to ongoing, constant, continuous education and training, reaching people in the most remote areas around the country. They just launched in March 2015. So really cool startup to watch and to check out, and I have their contact if you want to connect with them. This one, does anyone recognize this or know what company this is? Or does anyone know what product she's holding? Yes, some people said it. AfroPads. So AfroPads is a Ugandan social enterprise, also started up by a Canadian and his American wife. Another brilliant, innovative, sustainable solution to a woman's monthly challenge. And in Africa, 1 of 10 schoolgirls drop out of school or skip school